It's okay, Gokul. We're live. You have a bad t-shirt. It's fine. We're all
I
I
mean,
think that's the main joy of podcasting. I mean, this is my first experience doing that. Like I'm professional here. I just go to the bottom right and click on live on YouTube and call it a day, right? But I
yeah,
like the informality of it and the casualness of it. So yeah, thanks for hanging out together today.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're half vaccinated, Kyle, is that correct?
I'm now fully vaccinated.
Oh, okay. Number
Fully,
two.
number two. That's right.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a very interesting conversation today, and I've had the honor to work with George Mark Children's House when I first started this work, actually, with getting students internships and having them step in, put their foot in the door, of getting experiences. And it was such a unique experience. And I've really enjoyed having the conversations with the variety of team members at George Mark Children's House since day one. And I forgot who I mean, it was I definitely talked to people who we're talking to now, but I forgot the woman's name. It might have been I think it was the ED at the time, or the ED still, I believe.
Linda?
It could have been Linda. Yeah, I have to look back at my emails and whatnot. But I just the vision, of George Mark and the care, the deep care you guys put in, right, to the work that you do. It's just so it's both very heartfelt and it's also very fascinating, right? How you guys approach this. And then, bucking you guys over time has been I think I'm really glad that we did that because seeing the program that you have now, right, with the maker therapy program is incredibly powerful. Just that exploration, that experiment, right, is also just very enlightening and I just see a big value in it. For me, I would just I'm a maker. Like I've been in tech shop, I've used laser cutters, I've used wood shops, I used metal shop. I was an architecture major, and I know the therapy of it. Like I go in there because I want to feel good. I'll go in there because I want to be creative. I go in there because I want to make something that I feel like is valuable in the world, right? Whatever that may be, right, as it goes. And I know we're starting kind of square one here, right? He's got a large journey here, but very excited about our prospects here. So, Kyle, love to have you introduce yourself, and then Gokul thereafter. And we typically go into kind of a storytelling of your journeys. So I'd like to kind of just dive in a bit more on yourself, Kyle, right now, and then go into Gokul as we kind of go, if you don't mind. So maybe just do a light introduction of both you guys as a start.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Kyle Amsler. I am the Child Life Coordinator at George Mark Children's House. Should I define child life right here for those who don't know?
Please.
Great. So I'm a certified child life specialist, and child life specialists are educated and clinically trained, normally in the hospital setting, but all different settings, to help families understand the developmental impact of illness and injury on children. So we're really all about making healthcare experiences better for children, whether that's in a hospice setting, in a palliative care setting, which we'll get into, or in the hospital, helping kids understand what's happening to them and helping normalize what's happening to them, helping them have some fun when they can and improve their quality of life. So child life specialists really help improve patient and family care and their overall experience with healthcare in general.
Thank you. Gokul.
You know how I find it so awkward introducing myself. So can the other people see us, Derek? Are the other attendees, they can see us, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're live right now.
Oh,
you're on stage.
My name is Gokul Krishnan. I am the founder of Maker Therapy, which is an innovative pediatric care experience that designs creative and technologically rich environments for hospitalized and chronically ill patients and their families.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll certainly dive into that. But first and foremost, before I run into any issues on my side and anyone who's doing who's watching this video when they're in your program runs into as they kind of go on their journey building these projects, can we define just a few words first? Because we all live in acronym land, and in this particular area, it's more sensitive. So I want to just bring up particular words and define it first. So can you just define a few of the key words here, right? So could you define pediatric? Could you define palliative care? Could you define the variety of words that we may be using today, just so people know what the definitions are?
Definitely. So pediatric generally refers to infants, children, and young adults up to about age 25. And pediatric palliative care is specialized medical care for those children and young adults, often up to age 25, who are living with a serious illness. And palliative care really focuses on providing relief from the symptoms that you have with a serious illness and the stress of illness. And the goal is really to improve quality of life for the child, infant, or young adult with the serious illness and their whole family. So siblings, parents, grandparents, caregivers, everyone who's involved in that child's life, helping them have the best day possible each day.
Wonderful. And Gokul, any kind of clarifications or words on your front that you live in, that you have on acronym land with maker therapy?
I think it's, I'm learning a lot from this project, just working with George Mark Children's House. So all the new acronyms that are being associated with maker therapy and pediatric palliative care, I'm learning a lot from Kyle. So Kyle is my teacher per se, right? And so we're learning how to bring those two worlds together. And just for example, just how to define the patient population as well. And correct ways of of associating things at George Mark Children's House. So I'm learning along the way, and so Kyle's the expert in this field, and we're just learning from her.
And the space is such an interesting Venn diagram, right? You're bringing pediatric palliative care, right, with the art and creativity of making, to bring relief, right, and to bring quality of life, right, to your patients. And do you call them patients? Do you call them, what would you call them on a normal basis?
When we're speaking generally, we often use the term patients to refer to the children we work with at the house. But you could also say children or young adults, depending. You'll hear me say both, but patients is fine.
Okay, great. So this is a very interesting and unique position that you have, Kyle, working in this space. And there must be something when you were young, right? Or some particular instance or experience that you had, right? That gets people to be in this position of being a child life coordinator, child life specialist, right? To be able to actually enter the space and have that, all the well-roundedness you need to be able to actually address, the scenario at hand. So dive into where this started for you and how you got to where you're at now and how that journey's been up until George Mark.
Definitely. Okay, let me see if I can summarize this as best I can. So I would say probably my journey started when I was 7 and my mom was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. And growing up with her having stage 4 breast cancer and then having terminal breast cancer, as a child, nobody ever told me what was going on with her cancer. I don't think I even really understood what cancer was. I certainly didn't understand what death and dying is. And she died when I was a teenager, when I was in high school. And that experience really made me think about how we work with children who are encountering the healthcare systems, whether that's children who are ill themselves or children who have a family member who's sick. And I started researching, is there a role somebody who works directly with children to help them understand healthcare experiences. And that's how I found Child Life. And when I was in the Peace Corps in Guatemala, I had some more experiences with death and dying with my host family, and just seeing how my host family was so open with my host brother and sister about the death of their aunt at the time, and how involved they were with all the funeral planning and all of that, just really like solidified why I wanted to do Child Life. So after I got back from the Peace Corps, I went back to graduate school and studied developmental psychology. And I did my Child Life internship at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh in all different units, adolescent medicine, the outpatient oncology or cancer clinic. And then I worked in the pediatric ICU, was my first job in a pediatric burn center in inner city Philadelphia for 2 years. And I saw children dying in the hospital on a weekly or sometimes daily basis. And again, wanted to know if we could do death better for children and young adults. And that led me to George Mark, the very first freestanding pediatric palliative care center in the United States, and still the only one in California. And yeah, coming here, really learning how I think we do end of life care so well, how we care for the whole family and how we care for children and young adults with serious illnesses. So definitely found my place. That's kind of my journey getting here.
Yeah. So you fell into you went into a direct experience, right? Where you're experiencing a family member who was terminally ill. Mm-hmm. And then you became curious yourself as to other children like yourself or teens who were experiencing, these traumatic scenarios. And right. Then you dove in a little deeper and found yourself supporting in the Peace Corps, it sounds like, mm-hmm. And then be able to then fall into particular nations or countries that you were having experiences in, and then actually started working with kids themselves who were terminal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
And so interpreting that, now, how does that, was there any, what was the intentional aspect there? How did you just meander into this, or was there a point where you're like, we really need to do death better, right? What was the moment that triggered your commitment to this space?
Yeah, I think it was that moment when I was in the Peace Corps in Guatemala, working with my host family who had the death of a young family member, and remembering and reflecting back on my experience and how, nobody talked to me or my brother about anything, and comparing that to what I was seeing with my host family. And that's really when I went to the little internet cafe and paid, to buy an hour of internet in the mountains of Guatemala, and started Googling like job that helps children understand death and dying. And I found Child Life, and it just went from there. I knew I had found the job for me.
So my sister's a nurse, I think an NP, a nurse practitioner. And it always fascinates me how frank she is, right? With sensitive, health condition topics. Mm-hmm. I think generally it's pretty difficult for people to enter that space. It's as, it's as taboo as, the conversations today with the national message, right? Around, say, Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ kind of scenarios, or, it's as sensitive as that. But in this scenario, it actually is a conversation about death, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you went down this kind of path to understand this space, right? Was it a gradual understanding? Is it a callous, or is it more of like an acceptance, right? And desire for optimism. What allows you to have the strength to talk about it frank, open, and honest now?
Yeah, I think it definitely came with experience, with 2 years of graduate school and then my internship in the Children's Hospital. And for the first time, really working with children with serious injury, illness, and children at the end of their lives, and children who were dying actively. And I think just through my studies and experiences, you learn that it is better to be honest and frank. And in this country, we don't like to talk about death and dying, as you mentioned, and we especially don't like to think about children dying, but children do die and children do get sick. Disability is another thing we are not comfortable talking about in this country, I feel like. So yeah, just over time, learning how to talk about it. I'm still learning every day, and learning from the families and the kids I work with. But I've just learned we need to talk about it because it happens. It's not going to go away because you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how would you encourage people who are kind of uncomfortable talking about it to be more, not comfortable talking, because I think it's uncomfortable in general, but to just, what kind of tips do you usually give on a daily basis, say to your families who are experiencing someone who's terminally ill, right? Or maybe a relative that's external, or maybe partners, right? Like Gokul or myself, right? Like how do you advise, into this space so that we could do death better, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a complex question. I think, it definitely depends on the age of the child or the person that you're talking to about death and dying. But I always say use the words death, use the words dying, especially with children. If you say pass away or different words like that, they might not completely get what you mean. And what we are talking about is death and dying, and that your body stops working. You're no longer alive, explaining what that is. So just frank and simple language is really important, I feel, and direct language. And there's a lot of great resources out there now on the internet to learn how to talk about it, or learn what to say to somebody who's grieving, or has somebody in their lives, has a child who's dying. And you're not always going to get it right. And everybody has different ways they want to talk about it too. So being mindful of that and other people's cultures, and culturally, families are so different too. So yeah, but I always start at using the words death and dying.
Mm-hmm. So we don't have to go into the space of how you actually prepare the patients or the children, right, for death, right? But when it comes to people who are partnering with those who, give us the personalities, right, of your children and your patients. What is their collective, optimism? What's their collective feel? What kind of energy do they continue to bring, right, to life, that they show to people, right? Anybody, whether it's other children who are not terminally ill, to their relatives, or to whomever, right? How do they present themselves, and how do they like to be presented, and how do they want to be communicated to?
Mm-hmm. Should I give a little overview of George Mark and our services? I think that might help contextualize
Sure.
Too, because we haven't gone into it yet. So like I mentioned, George Mark is the first freestanding pediatric palliative care center in the United States. So that means we aren't affiliated with or partnered right now with another organization. And we are a house up on a hill in San Leandro, and we're designed very much to feel like a house and a home, and not a hospital or a facility. We have 8 patient rooms, and we have 2 family suites. So those are like family apartments where families come and live on site if they have a child here for end of life care, or in some other circumstances as well. So we work with children and young adults from age 0, so infancy, up to 25. So we have a very big range that we work with, and we have 3 main care programs. The first is our respite care program. So not every child who is here is terminally ill, right? We work with children who have a chronic illness, a serious illness, or a life-limiting illness, which means that they have a shortened life expectancy when we say life-limiting illness. For some of our patients, that's very shortened, like maybe they won't live past infancy, or maybe 5, or for some of them, it's maybe they won't live until adulthood. So there's a lot of range in there. So for respite, that gives families a break from their round-the-clock care for caring for a medically fragile child. Caregiving is a full-time job. So we can care for the kids here, and the parents can have their own surgeries or go have a special trip with a sibling or whatever they want to do. We kind of say it's our gift to our families, our respite care program. And it's great because we get to know the children really well. So if they do end up needing end of life care, we've already established those relationships with the families. Our second program is our transitional care program. So that's between hospital and home. So if you have a child with a new diagnosis, a new piece of medical equipment that the family would need to learn how to use and learn how to care for the child, they can come here, again, the whole family, learn that care, get comfortable, and then go home. And then our third is the end of life care program. So that's when the families often live on site in our family suites. The whole immediate family, siblings live here too, and we'll care for the child until they die. We have ongoing bereavement programs. So any family who has interacted with any of our services, if their child dies, whether here or at home or in the hospital, we have an amazing social worker. We have our staff psychologists who work with our families for as long as they need, whenever they need. So they can come back 10, 15 years down the road and we'll be here for them. Or they can come meet with us every week. Whatever they need, we meet them where they're at. So, yeah, I think because there's such a broad range of patients, it's hard to, every patient and family is very different. Many of our children have a developmental delay, which means even though they might be 16 years old in their brain development, maybe they act or think or process more like an infant or a toddler. Many of our patients are nonverbal, so that means they don't use words like you or me to speak, but they communicate maybe with their expressions or vocalizations, gestures, eye gaze devices. There's a whole range. So I think here we are about living life to the fullest and having fun every day if you can, but also not expecting. I think it's important not to place on children who are ill like being an inspiration or always being optimistic, because that's not the reality when you're dying or when you have a child who's dying or very sick. And it's okay to feel all those ranges of emotions and yeah, so we just try to make every day the best we can and meet them where they're at.
Great, thank you for that. You mentioned, so let's go a little deeper with George Mark Children's House. So you mentioned a freestanding palliative care center, right? And pediatric palliative care center.
Yeah.
And so, okay, explain what freestanding in this case means. Elaborate on some of the work these have done before, perhaps even that's gone the organization to where it's at today. Because from my understanding, you guys are really good at what you guys do, and you guys have, you've had, I'm sure many accolades, but also I think your founder or exec has done a TED Talk, right? So share more about some of the reasons why George Mark Children's House's organization, has deserved all these particular kind of messages that they're sharing to the world and accolades that you received. Just share some of that work that you've done, right?
Yeah, so our founder, Dr. Kathy Hull, is a psychologist, and I highly recommend her TED Talk. It's called Inside a Home for Terminally Ill Children, and you'll hear her whole story there. So I don't want to tell it all for her, but she experienced loss in her family as well, and then was working at a children's hospital, and again saw children dying in the hospital and thinking there has to be a better way. And she went and saw models called children's hospices in the UK. And that's really where the inspiration for George Mark came from, is that model in the UK where it is a home-like environment outside of the hospital, where you can have pets, and we have a huge cafeteria and a chef, and everyone eats together when we bring in dogs and bunnies, and we have a camel, and we have music and picnics, and you don't have those restrictions of the hospital, and you can do all sorts of things that you couldn't do in the hospital setting. So that's really how we started, because something like that didn't exist in the United States before. ever. And so she was the first one to really do it and pioneer it. And we became the pioneers of this model that exists in other parts of the world, but hadn't existed here in the United States. And now we're so fortunate because people were able to see our model and start homes like ours in other parts of the United States. And there's dozens under development still. I think the next closest one is Ryan's house in Arizona. There's one in Minnesota, Crescent Cove. So the movement is taking off, though. I still say we have a little ways to go. So yeah, that's kind of how we started. And we have a great staff of clinical staff, and we have a robust volunteer program. We have volunteers here 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, helping make the days great. So hopefully that kind of answered your question.
Yeah. So when it comes to the core of it, George Mark Children's House started based on this kind of model, right? Where we need to do death better, right? And so we need to provide an experience that allows for as much relief and therapy for these children as possible, right? So as you guys did your work for the last many years, what were some of the experimentations and problem sets that you looked at that you know of, at least, that got George Mark's, what kind of prior, experiments have you done based on key problems have you executed on before to get George Mark's services to be much more robust and experiential?
Well, I think we've always had the same model, right? We've always provided respite, transitional, and end-of-life care, though we have our respite program has really grown. That's been one thing I think when we opened, we thought we would be doing primarily end-of-life care, and now we really see the need in the community for parents to have respite from the caregiving. And so that program has grown exponentially, and we do a lot of respite care, which is wonderful. I think, it's hard. I don't know all the experiments we've done. I think we've always been, quite good at quality of life and doing fun things. We're always trying new programs or new things, but a lot of things have also stayed the same, like our therapy dog program, or collaborating with Make-A-Wish to make kids' wishes come true, or whatever the kids want to do while they're here, we try our best to make that happen, whether that's a random belt coming and visiting, we're fortunate from the San Francisco Giants, able to make that happen. Doing a prom, because a lot of our patients might not get to experience going to prom, or maybe are unable to go to school because of their illness. So we do that, so a lot of those programs have been going on a long time, but we're always thinking about how to expand those programs. And I think that's where maker therapy comes in too, is looking at our art room and looking at the space and looking at legacy building, which we'll get into, and how we could do it better. And so this is a new thing that has never been done before, as far as I'm aware, in any pediatric palliative care center. So we're really excited to try it out and see what a maker space looks like in this setting.
Sure. Yeah. So let's get into this kind of deeper on this kind of, I really love the concept of doing death better. I mean, there's almost like no particular end to how to make it better, right? Because we can always make the experience of life better for those who are terminally ill, right? And so tell us about the relationship with Gokul and maker therapy, and we'll get deeper into that as we segue into Gokul. But why don't you share some context here before we introduce him further?
Yeah,
I like Kyle doing the talking, so this is great.
You are learning still.
I'm learning.
Here, oh my goodness. Gosh, I saw Gokul's work on social media, first of all, and I was helping out with George Mark Children's House's social media account. So I think I followed Maker Therapy on Twitter and Instagram for them or something, and we ended up talking. And just thinking about our art room, which is the space we're going to focus on, there's a lot of things that's great about it, and there's a lot of things that need improvements. And so just looking at what Gokul was doing in the hospital setting and at Ronald McDonald House, which he'll talk about more, and his work with patients and thinking about patients as innovators and creators and makers, and their families as that as well, and providing a space where they can get away from everything else or use the space to do memory making or honor their child's life, was really interesting to me as a child life specialist. So yeah, Gokul has done a lot of amazing work, and it's going to be really cool to see how it works here.
So Gokul, would love to have you share your story of how you got through this work too. I would assume that everyone who goes in this space has a direct experience. So feel free to share your story. How'd you get here?
Sure. I've had quite a journey with maker therapy, but it started in 2013 when I was a PhD student at Vanderbilt University. And in September of 2013, I was introduced to Brandon, who's a bright and aspiring high school senior whose goal was to become an engineer. But unfortunately, Brandon had been diagnosed with leukemia and was undergoing treatment in the children's hospital. And I remember when I first met Brandon, he said, there's nothing for him to do in the hospital, right? He was like, I don't want to do the kind of like the art and craft activities. I don't want to do the music. I want to do something which was kind of like stimulate my interest. He wanted to be an engineer, right? But he felt there was a lack of activities to stimulate his interest. And so he wanted something to do. So I took this the shoebox and I put in some materials in it. I put in some circuits that I found in my desk at the College of Education. I put in some stuff there. I got some art and craft materials, from the hospital, and I put it in this shoebox. And I said, Brandon, here's your mystery box. And I want you to design and make anything you can imagine using the stuff in this box. So I was kind of nervous because it could go either two ways, because either Brandon could love it and come up with something, or either he could absolutely hate it and tell everyone in the hospital that he doesn't want Gokul to come back. The patients are very brutally honest. If they don't like something, they will tell everyone that they don't like it. And so I was really nervous. I was like, this is the first time I'm in the hospital, my first experience with a young patient. And so at 6 a.m, I got an email from Brandon's mom saying, hey, Gokul, Brandon actually made something. You need to come back to the hospital and see him. So I biked back to the hospital and I met him, and he made a nightlight for nurses. And the purpose of the nightlight was to illuminate the patient's bathroom, allowing nurses to determine if any trash needed to be disposed of without the nurse turning on the bright light and waking up Brandon or his mom from sleeping. And I asked Brandon, why did you make this? I said, your mom could have gone to CVS or Walgreens and got a motion control light. You could just put in the bathroom. He said, I spent 8 hours working on this that I forgot I was in the hospital. And so it's kind of like that experience with Brandon, which inspired me to engage with other kids in the hospital using these varieties of tangible learning tools. And I was just working with these kids. A lot of them were teens. The results just reveal multiple demonstrations of children enjoying their learning and also coming up with creative DIY or do-it-yourself solutions. And that's how I came up with the idea of imagine if there was a space that could provide children in the hospital with creative outlets and learning opportunities. And that's how I launched Maker Therapy. It started off with a mobile maker environment. And so when I was a student, I helped design a mobile maker space for cystic fibrosis patients. And for cystic fibrosis patients, it's chronic lung disease. It affects their immune system, their digestive system. And when they get admitted into the hospital, they are isolated there for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And so I worked with these young patients in designing a mobile maker environment that could go into their room and it could stay there for the entire duration of their treatment. And so in that space, I worked with these patients in designing it. It was colorful and bright. It was, they could control the color of their cot according to their mood. It had like a 3D printer. It was the first time we actually had like a 3D printer brought into the patient's room. It had tablets where patients could virtually collaborate with each other. It had just different like circuit building things. We tried to make a boring looking cot super cool, right? And so that's what the patients wanted. We want something cool in our room. And the reason for leaving it in their space for the entire duration of their treatment, just 24 hours a day, was I think there's a tendency when we ask people to like make, or like, you know, you have to make this within these 2 hours, right? And I didn't want to like pressurize them in making something within like a specific time. So I would introduce the stuff in the space to them, and I would tell them, I want you to figure things out. You can talk to nurses, the child life specialists, you can work with your families and just try to figure things out and make something that's personally meaningful to you. And so I was kind of like nervous as well, because usually many of the activities happen during a specific time, right? And you kind of like force these kids, like make something during this time, right? We actually found out, like, you know, as we, over a year after like doing this, you know, children's creations fell into 4 general categories. The first one was they would come up with artifacts that could decorate their room, devices that could solve privacy issues, gadgets that could depict a patient's mood or state of well-being. And the most popular for like the younger kids was coming up with devices that could prank a nurse. Right? Yeah. And so pranking or scaring the healthcare providers was a really popular activity for these kids. And so, you know, they were just coming up with all these ideas. I wasn't telling them like what to make and what to design. I told them to like come up with ideas that were meaningful to them, and also repurpose stuff around the hospital. Just an example, one of my favorite inventions that a young patient made was a pooping bell. And so every time she was in the bathroom, and like she would open the bathroom door, she would find out there were people in her room. She could never hear people knock on the door. In hospitals, patients can't lock their door, anyone can enter. Right? And so she came up with a device using circuits, and she used like a Snuggies box, and she decorated it. And she came up with a device where anytime somebody had to come into the room, they would press a button, and a loud buzzing noise would go off inside the room, and then she would yell pooping. And then people realized that, you know, there are many times patients have said when they're changing, when they come out, like people just come into the room and their privacy is being invaded, right? And so she came up with this pooping bell, which actually provided awareness as well, that many times people come into the room without finding out what the patient is doing in their room, right? And so, yeah, you know, the kids were coming up with all these ideas. We used wearables on the patients, and we found out that 2 things. The most popular time the space was used, they would use the mobile maker space, was actually late at night, after 11 o'clock at night. Because during the day, they would be going through so many treatments, they would be meeting the doctors, the nurses, they would be really tired, they would be sleeping, but they would be awake at night, right? So a lot of the making happened late at night. And we also found out that patients' physical activity increased 7.5-fold with the mobile makerspace in the room. So on an average, without the space, they would take only 350 steps the entire day, which isn't much. It's essentially getting up from the bed, going to the restroom, coming back. But with the space, the total number of steps started to increase to nearly like 3,000 steps. And so they were getting out of their bed, they were collaborating more, they were a lot more like physically active. And so it's kind of like the approach of designing these spaces. It's also a therapeutic approach, right? It's kind of like the symbiotic relationship between mental health, physical health, and emotional health as well. Yeah, and so it started off with the mobile makerspace approach, and then it kind of transitioned to my work at Stanford Children's Hospital and Ronald McDonald House. Was how do you design kind of like dedicated innovation spaces, right? How do you redesign spaces into a new patient experience, right? And so we opened up a innovation pop-up space in the cancer ward at Stanford Children's Hospital. So there's a kitchen in the cancer ward, and there was this space which was kind of like not used much. There was a couch and an old refrigerator. And we said, what if we could like remove that and turn that into a pop-up space? And I worked with patients. I hired patients to be my interns in helping design that space into a cool pop-up space. We use the word cool quite a bit because this is cool design, I feel. And so, for example, with that pop-up space in the cancer ward, the patients didn't like the traditional furniture. They didn't like these brown tables. So we created a table using Lego blocks. And then we put interactive lighting as well, which could change color according to like sound, and patients could control the color. There was also shelving where we could actually display what the patients had created, and those could also light up. And so we try to create a space that would get the patients out of their rooms, because one of the challenges was many of these, the adolescent and young adult cancer patients I worked with, they didn't want to leave their room. So how do you get them out of their room, right? And so so the purpose of the space was giving them activities and opportunities where they could come in whatever time they wanted. We left it open 24/7, where they could experiment and play around with the different kinds of tools and technologies and just make things, right? Just a really popular use of the 3D printer was many patients would have dreams about animals. And so they would want to use the 3D printer to bring their dreams to life. And it was kind of like fascinating, like how they want to use the tools. And we would find out from the folks in engineering and that sometimes at like 11 o'clock and like even at midnight, when patients were 3D printing something, they would just sit there and watch the 3D printer print out their object for like hours, right? And so we found out actually watching something being printed was therapeutic for the patients. And so we kind of like improved on the space design where we put this large like TV monitor and we attached a camera to the screen, to the 3D printer, and it could be projected on this large TV screen. And so they could sit down and just watch their object being brought to life.
Ooh.
And so, yeah, we did that at Stanford, and at Ronald McDonald House, we redesigned a space into a family-centered space where families can also be engaged in designing and making. And a third space was a 3D printing zone at Stanford Children's Hospital where patients could be introduced to 3D printing and design and modeling and just make things, right? And also we came up with the plan when the patients go back home, their objects would be mailed to them as well. Right? And so, yeah, it's kind of like my job is been inspired by HGTV, right? I just love like how they redesign these spaces into spaces that work for. It's kind of like with HGTV, you design a space that works for the people who want to live in that house, right? And it's with the George Mark Children's House, it's not like one model fits all. Like the design that works at a Stanford Children's Hospital, Ronald McDonald House, might not necessarily work at George Mark Children's House. The space is going to look different. The activities are going to look different. And I think that's a problem in like a lot of like pediatric institutions where many of the spaces just look the same, right? And so, so what works? What does the space look like at George Mark Children's House that works for the patients, works for the families, and work for the staff, right? And so we don't have all the answers, right? And that's what makes this project exciting. Right. And I think it's about, this whole maker movement, right? We still live in this bubble, right? The maker movement, when you think about the maker movement, you think of museums, you think of schools, but you don't think about pediatric facilities. You don't think about pediatric palliative care facilities. And so I get kind of like offended when we use the term, it's global, this movement. It's not truly global if we're not working with everyone. It has to be inclusive for all, right? Just because a child who has, say, 2 weeks left to live, does that mean that they can't be engaged in this growing maker movement or this maker mentality? And so to make something global, it has to be inclusive for all, right? And yeah, I think I'm just going to stop talking. Right?
Well, you provide a lot of context, because at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to is the making is a form of control, right? And having control means you may have a vision, right? Or a desire or a design or a solution, right? It's just an expression of what's going on in brain that they want to create, right? To make some level of an impact, some level of a change, some level of an alteration, some level of a solution for a problem, right? And I feel like the children, right, at George Marks and all these pediatric care, palliative care centers, right, they lost control, right, of the only control that they feel like they thought they had, right, which is of their body, right, in themselves. And so anything that allows them to create, right, to establish more control of their brain that they still have, right, they're able to then feel, right, that therapy. Kyle, does she have some?
I'm just agreeing with you. You hit the nail on the head. And at least in the child life world, we always talk about control in the healthcare setting and how can we give children control when so much is out of their control. So you're right on.
And thank you. And the pop-up, so I'm imagining a mobile fab lab right now, but I think your mobile fab lab is kind of like is it like a thing you can wheel in, kind of like a cart of some sort?
Yeah, that's what the first design, when we actually helped, we redesigned it 2 years back. We worked with the Fogarty Innovation Institute at El Camino Hospital. And so we completely designed a mobile makerspace that was called a Maker Egg. It was completely transparent and it was made out of like plastic, and it opens up. And so we completely even redesigned that, right? And it was trying to make things that are appealing to a child, right, in the hospital. And I think first appearances as well. You see so many carts around in the hospital, and if you just take a boring looking cart and you put stuff on it, there's not enough space anyway in a patient's room, right? And so why would they want to keep this in the space, right? And so you have to bring in something which is cool, captivating as well, intriguing. We designed 2 of these mobile maker spaces, and we had like 2 patients virtually collaborating with each other. There was a girl I think it was in the 4th floor, who she had her own mobile maker space, and there was a girl in the 6th floor who came up with that pooping bell. And she was telling the younger girl, the 8-year-old girl, about this pooping bell, and that girl got so excited that she came up with ideas. And a lot of patients get inspired by other patients, right? And yeah, because I remember when that young girl, she came into the hospital and she really liked the space. She said, Gokul, is there anybody else who's using this? Can I talk to someone else, right? And so it was a way of like, supporting like virtual collaboration. And I think we're trying to do that, right? Kyle, in the space is about, incorporating an interactive like whiteboard where, Kyle, you were saying something that you were talking to people like even in Colombia as well. And am I right?
So that attended our palliative care summit, perhaps?
Summit, like just like, if Kyle wants, like if Kyle, like, talking to like other people, like, in different countries and like, it's just like, how do you even support kind of like, that virtual collaboration as well, right? I think there's so much to do, and that's what makes this exciting as well, right? And I think making is just beyond. When we talk about like innovation, like design, it's about the experience that we're talking about, right? Not everything that we create has to be innovative, has to like solve a problem. No, I mean, somebody wants to make Pikachu and it makes them happy, so be it. How many Pokemons were printed out with the 3D printer, but that made the kids so happy, right? And so I think when we talk about like in the medical world and like innovation, it's always like the medical device, the innovation, which is solving like a problem, but innovation is about, creating this positive experience as well, right? So redefining what does learning look like in a pediatric environment? What does innovation actually look like, right? That helps improve the quality of life, helps improve the patient experience.
Well, it's very fascinating, everything that you're talking about, because what you're saying about watching the 3D printer is therapy within itself. And then or just to even have this eggshell transparent system rolling into your, rolling into your, your room, right? And it feeling cool and exciting is therapy within itself. Be able to wake up and say, I like camels. I'm going to print a camel, right? And make my dream come true, right? And print this animal that they had in their dreams or anything in their dreams, to see it happen, right? Is then therapy within itself. Just using the tools, right? Using the creation abilities, using the abilities for today, of today, right? To manifest for anybody, right? The ability to create, to feel that sense of satisfaction and ability to feel like they're contributing, right? Or obtaining, right? That's there's so much there, right? Especially in this space where, again, people are, these children are stripped, right? Like, are stripped of control of their themselves, right? And how can we maximize the ability for them to create again, right? I think that's such a fascinating space to contribute to, right? And I want to actually unveil what our project is for students now, because we have a lot of good context here now, right? And all that was there to so students really understand, right, where the intent is, right, the possibilities are, right? So this is quite a long sentence. We could probably whittle it down a bit more, but I'll do it on its unabridged version. So we want students to design and prototype and bring to life legacy making projects for George Mark Children's House Pediatric Palliative Care Center, utilizing the makerspace, right? That'll be inside there. Such as tools that most makerspace may have, like a 3D printer, a laser cutter, 3D scanning, maybe, to establish and honor and memorialize and establish legacy for these young patients, right, with life-limiting conditions. And this legacy making projects could be customized urns, could be memory boxes of many different kinds and sorts that could be defined, and things like hand molds, right? And then we're talking about stuff like these pranks and this making of your mood, right? Privacy kind of contraptions, right? And even decoration, right, to customize the space. There's so many aspects of what they can make, and then also they can gain therapy on the process of making as well, right? And then also, it seems like also the social collaborative part of it as well is then also part of it. So I'd love for each of you to be able to break that down a bit, right, in your own perspectives of how this is contributing to your mission of what you want to get out there with this maker therapy program in George Mark, and how asking students to do this will help contribute, right, and advance, right, the project that you have going on. Maybe Kyle, you can get started first.
Yeah, so right on. So I think we really, through this project, do want to foster collaboration with our community who can help bring these different designs and ideas of our patients and families to life. And I, as a child life specialist, am not, I don't know or have the time to know everything about design and engineering and how to do all that. So we're really looking for students who are competent in design and modeling, who can help bring the designs to life. Like you mentioned, an urn is a big one that we want prototypes that are designed and that could then be customized. We'd love the development of video tutorials, instructional guides, and manuals for creating the projects that I could use with families. And yeah, I can show a little bit of the space now or later and some of the things we've done so far. But we do have a 3D printer and the Glowforge laser engraver. So I'm in the art room right now. So you can see the 3D printer back there. And then we've been using the Glowforge a lot, which is here. And we do all sorts of projects with our Glowforge. So one thing we have on site is our memorial fountain, which has the names of all of our children, patients who have died. So we've been using that to engrave stones. This one doesn't have a name for patient privacy, but we'll engrave their name and the date, the year of death, and place that at the fountain. We've been making things to give families when they come back for different memorial services or events that we have, bereavement events for families for grieving. So these were hummingbirds that we made and gave out to families for our Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead celebration. Beautiful. And then some other things we're looking at are like, what can you do with handprints? This was one I prototyped on acrylic, but we'd love to look at how you could put that on a box, or how to make 3D molds of all the family members holding hands and be able to potentially 3D print that as something the family could have forever. So those are some of the things we're thinking of. So we just really need the students to help us and help me know how to do it and how to bring them to life.
Yeah, so creating prototypes, creating templates, creating generalized iterations of a variety of different legacy making projects that allows for customization at a simple or easy level for whether it's yourself and or the family.
Exactly. So we could have a prototype of an urn, and then the family could add whatever they wanted to that design, a drawing that the child had made, or the child's handprint, or all of their handprints together, anything like that. So yeah, that we have the base prototype that families can then customize would be awesome.
Wonderful. Gokul, you want to add to that conversation?
Kyle, could you just explain, like, the legacy, right? The legacy makerspace, because I think what we're trying to do is we're here to support Kyle, right? We're trying to create a space where, we're supporting Kyle, where when she's working with the patients and she's working with the families, we're creating a space and also this collaborative environment which can support the child life specialist. And what we're trying to do is trying to develop a model where Kyle, you can jump in. Like every pediatric environment, they have child life specialists, right? And so we're trying to develop a model where if other child life specialists in pediatric environments work with patients who have all these ideas, what does it take to help bring these ideas to life, right? What does this model look like, right? How do we tap into the community in supporting the child life profession, right? So when a patient has an idea, do we just scribble it down and say, great idea, and that's it? But if a patient has an idea, how do we take that next step in bringing that idea to reality? So what we're trying to do is we're developing a model, right, that other institutions in the child life profession could learn from and could implement in their setting.
Exactly. And I can explain a little bit about what legacy building or legacy making is. So legacy building or legacy making, as we're going to call it in this space, is a perspective that and an intervention that child life specialists use. It's interventions that are focused on helping children and families create lasting memories during extended, stressful, or end-of-life healthcare experiences. So legacy building can be all different things. It can be having a visit from our therapy horse and videotaping you riding it, or getting family pictures on our grounds because it's your last family picture. We have also found that families often want prints of their children's hands and feet. 3D so they can always hold them. Memory boxes that siblings can put all the special memories of their brother or sister in, or that even if the child is developmentally able, could customize themselves, making videos for family members to watch after you've died. That's a form of legacy building. So it's all different projects that think about what is your legacy, what are memories that you want to create and hold on to. So that could be tangible or intangible, but for this project, we are looking at some of those tangible things that we find families really wanting, like the handprints, like the memory boxes, the hand molds, thumbprint jewelry is another popular one, things like that.
And there really doesn't seem to be any particular bounds, right, of what's possible, right? But there's some starter kits, right, that you just mentioned that are good. And so how would you encourage someone to think about legacy making projects that are outside some of the examples you mentioned? And how do you all typically go through the process of thinking about how to create legacy making, legacy building interventions, right, throughout your careers and the work that you guys do?
Yeah, I think I explain it similarly to what I just explained and really let the families imagine what they want. Like here we work with Pixar really closely, and we've had Pixar come in and do sessions with families who have a dying child and draw the family as their favorite superheroes or draw the child as their favorite character. Yeah, I think the sky is the limit. And also for your students, they could think about what they would want their legacy to be if they were dying. Since many of your students are in that age range that we work with, maybe they have ideas that haven't been thought of yet of what they would want to leave behind.
Empathy, right? So being able to put themselves in the shoes, right, of these patients, or even to imagine himself as a mother or a father in the future,
right,
and having their son or daughter, be terminally ill.
Right.
That's, or their brother or their sister or their cousin or their family or their friend, right? So put themselves in their own shoes to say, what would I want to create, right?
Right. Exactly.
That's wonderful. So could you, maybe this is a question for Gokul now. What do you got in there? What do we got in here? We got 3D printer, we got 3D printer. I don't know what brand it is necessarily. That'll be helpful to know. You got the laser cutter, which is Glowforge. Yep. Could you describe how like the Glowforge, what's the bed size on that and the height of it? Just I'd like to get some technical details on some of the tools he's got so that students can have a clear understanding of what they're working with as parameters.
This is when I get on Google and find out what was given.
Our 3D printer is the Ultimaker.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I can.
How big? What's the volume of that?
The 3D printer is large. It's the Ultimaker S5, and so that's what's used in Boeing and L'Oreal. So this is the highest end like 3D printer. It's used a lot of like auto companies and all use it. So you can do amazing stuff with it. So it's not a small 3D printer. So it's the
it's like 12 by 12 by 12 almost. 12 inch by 12 inch by 12 inch seems like.
And so you can do amazing stuff with that.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Glowforge is I'm trying to figure out the
18 by 12 ish, 18 inch by 12 inches maybe, by like, what is that? How tall is that? Maybe like 4 inches, 3 inches, something like that.
I think it says like.
Do you open it up by chance?
Yeah.
Kyle?
It says usually the maximum printable area is like 11 inches deep and like almost like 20 inches wide.
Oh, okay. It's pretty deep actually.
Yeah.
Okay. 20 11 inches tall, and then what was the other dimension?
20 inches wide.
20 inches wide. 20 by 11 by, what's the last dimension?
It said it can accommodate materials measuring 12 inches by 20 inches.
Okay, so 12 by 20. is the bed size. And then the height, I don't think is 11 inches though, right? It looks kind of a little bit shorter than that.
Yeah, it's much smaller. And I think it's about, it's more about the engraving aspect and the cutting aspect. And so trying to see, because I think Kyle can jump in. There's certain.
Sorry, 1 sec. I have a patient.
Sure.
Sure. So I think I think it depends on like what we can put in it, because you can't just put in any stone also inside of it. So there's a height limit, but but with the Ultimaker, the S5, that is the highest end printer that I gave George Marshall's house. And so there's a lot of like industrial companies are all using that exact printer.
Got it. And you guys are starting with laser cutter and 3D printer. Is there any other particular tools that you guys have, or small tools, manual, digital, what else are you do you have? And if nothing else, what else might you have in the future as well? Just want to get a layout of that.
So Derek, that's what we're actually exploring right now, is the different kinds of like, tools and like activities. And so we're trying to see, explore like what tools and technologies actually work in that space, right? And so, when we gave the Glowforge, let me ask, so Kyle, we were just talking about, what are the different tools and technologies that we use in the space. So when we started off with the laser cutter, I think the first step was, can it be used productively in the space, right? And so we found out, Kyle, she became proficient with it, and she found out like there's different ways of using the laser cutter. Like in March, when I get down there, I'll be showing like Kyle how to use the 3D printer, and we'll explore like how best ways of using that. Kyle's used little bits before, the snap-on magnetic circuits. And so I think we're going to be trying out different kinds of like tools. We don't know exactly what works because, as Kyle mentioned that many of the patients use wheelchair, nonverbal patients as well. And so a lot of it is it's about Kyle exploring the best use of these, the tools and technologies. So, Derek, there was that kid who got millions of dollars reviewing all these toys on YouTube, and he was doing that. And so we're trying to see, like, in a pediatric environment, right? You have all these different STEM technologies, right? And so we're trying to see what are the best tools and technologies that one could use in a pediatric palliative care facility. Because if, Kyle, I'm just saying, like, if say Ryan's house wants to see like what they can do in the space, they can figure out, like, we've developed a kind of like a playbook or a toolkit saying, here are different kinds of like tools and technologies that one can use in this space, right? For example, Derek, if you think about like the Arduino microcontroller and Raspberry Pi, you can't expect a young patient to learn a programming language. You can't expect Kyle to learn a new programming language and say, like, I'm going to take a course just to learn how to use a programming language. And so we're trying to see which is easy to use, right? It has this like low threshold for learning, but has a high ceiling. That means you can do so much with it, right? So we're doing a lot of like reviews of what tools, technologies work, and we're exploring a lot with light as well, and just using like cause and effect light as well, and sound. But to answer your question, we don't know. If we knew the answer, we would have all of it in the space, but we don't want to be kind of like the maker spaces, which has all the stuff, but nobody uses it. But also, things change as well, right? How do you create a space that's adaptable, that changes with time as well, right?
Yes.
It's like by the time you have the iPhone, after like 2 months, you're sick and tired of it. You want the new one that comes out after like a year, right? So
I think this is really, it's most perfect that you are being careful with what tools you buy in the beginning, right? Because I think what usually happens is the makerspace is powered by the people who use it, right? So if one person is deciding on what is being bought, right, those other people don't necessarily will adopt it, right? And so it's also helpful for our project that we're defined to these two machines, right? 3D printing and laser cutting, right? So for the students who are watching this, who are in the George Mark Children's House program, right, you got two tools that you can work with, right? 3D printing and laser cutting. And so what are the design types for that, right? So the design types for that would be a 3D model, right, that you do on an Autodesk Inventor, Autodesk Fusion 360, Rhino, Tinkercad, right? The variety of different 3D design softwares that you may have to create STL files, right? Or stereolithography files or 3D modeling files, right? They can export into STL files to 3D print, right? And there's a variety of you can probably look up Ultimaker and find out the variety of different filaments or, you know, materials that you can print right from there. So 3D design files is what Kyle's looking for in this Maker Therapy program. And also for the laser cutting side, right? It's probably Corel Draw or Adobe Illustrator, basically a vector-based file, right? That you would create lines and rasters. So basically, you know, lines and fills, right? So that this Glowforge can print. Yeah. So.
And you can make things that snap together too. So this is a box a patient made me. Oh, can't show her name, but she wrote, you know, engraved in the top, and then it has.
Beautiful.
So you can do things like that too.
Yeah, there's also, I think Autodesk had it before, but I think they removed it. I don't know why they removed it, but it was really cool. It's called 123D Make. And basically you give it a 3D model and it'll automatically slice it all together, slice it in X and Y, and then it'll flatten it into a laser cuttable file. And then you can just assemble it together to make a 3D model, which is really cool. So there's things you can do with the laser cutter, right, that you can make into a 3D object, right, which is the fun part, which I think is what you talked about with the potential urns and the memory boxes, right?
Right.
Bring this stuff together. So those are the two file types, you know, that they're looking for, right? And you can let your creativity spin from there, right? Research, you know, come from that empathy state, you know, consider the options and priorities that, you know, that Kyle and Gokul mentioned in terms of types of stuff they're thinking about right now, and maybe iterating on those, and then be able to define, you know, what you want to create, and then be able to go into either or both, right? 3D printing or laser cutting, right? 3D modeling or a, you know, vector flat file, and then allowing the exploration of the design that you want to create, right? So just want to define that so students, when they're hearing this, kind of like, okay, cool, got it, right? Type of thing. One thing I want to share with you, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to, there's a lot of interesting things that we can do here, right? I mean, I'll show you this one thing called parametric design that I think is really interesting over time. This is definitely not now, right? Definitely not now. But parametric design might be an interesting way to allow families to have these levers, right, for the 3D model, right? So say you give them an urn, right? It's a 3D designed urn, and it's tethered to a parametric design model, right? An algorithm, basically, that then you can give families like the ability to like adjust the levers, right? So it gives them different inputs, and then the design can automatically form, right, based on what it is. And what's cool is that you can plug in, like, I know Rhino can do this. Rhino 3D software can do it. Then you plug in the Grasshopper parametric design system, and then you can even have it. You can input parameters too. So you can input a sensor of light, or you can input a sensor of distance with the distance kind of sensor, and then output light, right? And have the light be red or green, you know, all this stuff. So it's basically a 3D modeling software, 3D parametric design, and you can allow it to do whatever you want based on giving it inputs, right? And they can output live, right? So I'll share my screen because I'm always, it's funny because I always talk about parametric design, but I've never done it before. So it's something that I always want to do, because look at this. It's like, again, you can create these very natural formulated kind of, you know, objects, right? And you're just giving it parameters to design that. So I'll give you an example. So I'll type in Rhino Grasshopper parametric design. It'll show you what it actually looks like to create one of these. So to make this object here, right, you have this kind of whole algorithm on the right-hand side of what you're wanted to create, right? So you can define it like, I want this to be, it has to be 1 inches to 6 inches, right? And based on input, it can be 3.251, right? And it could be this tall, right? So you're giving it all these parameters to then automatically design, right? So this might be an interesting kind of space for the more advanced students to start thinking about for you, right? Who want to kind of go into these automated design systems so that we're helping, right, the child life coordinator and specialist on these sites to be able to not have to learn everything themselves, but there's actually technology that helps you design these things for you, right?
Yeah.
And then I feel like there's a lot of things that were spinning my brain throughout the conversation that I forgot now at this point. But I feel like there's a lot of possibilities to innovate. Like, okay, so there's another one, the social stuff, right? So I feel like all the patients and children at these pediatric palliative care centers can create like a network in the future, right? Like in the 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they can have a network of all these makers through the maker therapy program, right? With all these people have created these custom urns, and maybe there's a yearbook for them, and then people can help each other design things, right? And basically, like, I feel like that layer of collaboration and social connection through making is to me, it'd be I feel like that'd be a fundamental part of what I would want to see, right? If I were to put myself in those shoes. So there's this concept of, hey, I lost control, but I can create control. And then when I create control and create solutions, I can also talk about it with my peers, right? And to be able to leave that legacy as well, right? So I feel like there's this kind of, it's the creation of itself, the process of creation, and then the collaboration, right, among that network. That's all, I feel like, the maker therapy, right? It's the entire therapy of these children. So thanks for listening to my ramble there. And those are some things that are going on my brain on a long-term basis, right? So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, Glowforge has an amazing community board, and people do exactly that on the community boards and share their designs and ideas and build off of each other. So get where you're coming from.
Excellent. So we're essentially, I think we're good here. We've provided a lot of context, and I'd like to have each of you cap this particular podcast off before we go into the vlog recording after this, and sharing parting advice on what you would share with students who are in your program, right? And what would you want to share with them before they start their projects, because they'll watch this before they start their projects in the program. It's also a required watch, so they're going to be watching this right now. Yeah. So what would you share as part of advice for the students before they start on their journey on creating these legacy making projects?
I think I would say empathy and sensitivity are going to be huge, because we're talking about working with real children and real families who are going to be using these tools. And I think what you mentioned, Derek, of putting yourself in the shoes of being a sibling or a parent or dying yourself, what you would want as your legacy, what you would want to keep of that person, could really help you in this project. And George Mark is a really unique place to get to collaborate with. And I think it's going to be a really exciting project to be part of something that's never been done before. So you can tap into your empathy and sensitivity and being human and get more comfortable talking about death, dying, illness, disability. And I'll be here to guide you through all of that as well. And I think that's most important.
Wonderful. Gokul, you must have many words of wisdom on your front.
I think what Kyle said, exactly. I think the students who work on this project will, I think this empathy component, I think they'll turn out to be better human beings, I feel. I think working with George Mark Children's House really puts life into perspective as well. And I think it keeps you grounded. It's not about just thinking too much about the future. It's about thinking about the present, right? And I think, having been like a student and doing like engineering, we're always like racing ahead so fast. We're always thinking about all like future plans, but it's about just learning how to be present, I feel, right? And I think that's the reason why I'm excited just working with George Mark Children's House. I feel like, at the end of this project, I'll be a better human being, I feel. Yeah, it's hard to explain in words, but I think the students will learn a lot as well with whatever's going around, in the world. I think this will definitely ground them as well.
And I feel like the organization is so innovative, right? In how you guys do your work, even having a program like Maker Therapy and saying like, yeah, let's throw a makerspace in there, If you're a student that's in this program, if you have some additional ideas, right? I would say do not hesitate to contact Kyle and Gokul, right? Whether it's about making or not making, right? Maybe you have some ideas around digital media projects or the lighting project or things that aren't related to laser cutting and 3D printing, right? In addition to the laser cutting 3D printing project, right? What else do you have that you'd like to share, right? I think that that's super valid too, because if you were to put yourself in that position, right, and empathize with these families and the children itself, I'm sure you'll have this kind of deep understanding of yourself, just like Gokul mentioned about, being, like how to be a better human. And I'm sure you'll have ideas, right, along the way. So I would say do not hesitate to contact PilotCity so we can connect you, or through your means in the program, connect with Kyle and Gokul themselves. So thank you two for sharing your time and discussing a topic that's quite exciting, and also humbling at the same time. And that is it. We'll hold you back for a little bit and get into the content recording sessions for the vlogs, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Gokul.